You. Thanks for having me.
And you are on Twitter,
Yeah.
on Periscope. We've got you on the platform. And
I'm banned.
yeah, that's right. So, obviously I was inspired by President Trump's tweet this weekend, saying that he's going to do something, that his administration is going to do something about. So this was a significant phrase, right? He said it was, quote, illegal. Right? He basically just blatantly said that this discrimination is illegal. What was your response to his sentiment, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I was happy to see that President Trump was tweeting about it and talking about tech censorship. But at the same time, I also want to see more action on this, because we've been hearing for the last 2 years now that people realize, right? I think that we can all agree that this is wrong, and people in the highest positions of power in our government have been telling us that they've been monitoring the situation and that they are aware of the censorship, but nothing's been done about it. And here we are 6 months away from a presidential election, and every single day, these social media companies like Twitter and Facebook are creating more totalitarian rules and standards, I guess, which really just seem to be their way of getting away with in an election year, censoring conservatives and really helping the Democrats steal the election in 2020. And we see this with the Facebook Oversight Committee and their Supreme Court, which was loaded with Muslim Brotherhood activists and radical leftists. And the woman who's in charge of it is Pamela Karlan, who gave a pretty disgusting testimony to Congress in which she bullied President Trump's 13-year-old son. Okay, so these are the people who Facebook's working with. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they are in bed with radical leftists and progressives. And then you have Twitter coming out with a new rule saying that they'll label tweets from world leaders as misinformation and actually censor the tweets of elected officials if they are deemed hateful or misinformation.
Yeah, right. And let's just remind people, too, that Twitter changed its rules when you announced your run for Congress. That automatically should have given you a verified status. And all of a sudden, they changed the goalposts and the rule of the game on that, too, right?
Yeah, they did. And that's what's interesting, too, about President Trump's tweet is because what better person to talk about or highlight the issue of censorship than the woman who's running for Congress in your own backyard? I'm running for Congress in Florida's 21st Congressional District, which is here in Palm Beach, and it includes Mar-a-Lago. And President Trump and Mrs. Trump just became new residents of the district. And I just happened to be the most banned woman in the world, right? So, and I was banned for a tweet in which I called Ilhan Omar anti-Jewish, and I had dedicated my career, undercover, working for Project Veritas in the Hillary Clinton campaign, exposing voter fraud and corruption. Those videos helped President Trump get elected. And then when I started my own media company, I did a lot of activism and investigative journalism, exposing radical leftists and confronting some of our country's, biggest political enemies, who happen to also be President Trump's enemies. And so you see what has happened really is an injustice. And it's the same thing that they do to you. They misconstrue, the facts of the matter, and they twist and turn and push out false information about what people are saying and why they were banned. And then before you know it, you have the entire internet convinced that somebody is a supervillain or, some type of evil, hateful, racist bigot. And, that's a problem, because now I'm running for Congress. And as you mentioned, I've been denied social media accounts even for my congressional campaign. And it's not like my campaign is some type of stunt or joke. I'm the front runner in my race, and I'm actually out fundraising and out polling the Democrat incumbent. And yes, I was inspired largely to run for Congress as a result of all of this massive censorship and political bias, because nobody's doing anything about it.
I've got the T-shirt, Stop the Bias.
Yeah, and that's the movement I created, and this really is a movement. And I had a volunteer training yesterday with my volunteers, and it's exactly 3 months till the August primary, August 18th, and it really is a movement. And people from all over the country are supporting my campaign. I've received donations from people in all 50 states. Every day I get emails from people telling me that they find my congressional race and what I stand for to be very inspirational. And that's because, I'm on a mission to help save the First Amendment. I'm on a mission to help uphold our constitutional rights, our God-given rights, which are being threatened by these tyrants and these radical leftists, these full-blown communists in Silicon Valley who want nothing more than to destroy our country.
Yeah, the nexus between Trump at least paying lip service to this and him being now a constituent in your district. It will be your district, Laura. It just seems like a natural for him to come out and endorse you. And so that's what I wanted to ask you about too, is that, there are a lot of Republican con Inc. types. They don't like either of us. They don't like our big mouths. They don't like the fact that we're free thinking, independent, not owned. And, a lot of these people who say that they're for MAGA are not doing anything to support your campaign. On the other hand, you've had a lot of big names come forward and a lot of success in the last couple of weeks. That there seems to be this new groundswell and you're breaking into mainstream barriers that had been erected. So
big elephant in the room, right? It's becoming too big to ignore. And it's funny that you said that because Dave Weigel over at the Washington Post yesterday put out this article in which he outlined every single congressional race in the nation. And I was the only candidate who he decided to actually name by name in the article for the races in Florida. He just described the other races in terms of the amount of candidates running. Mm-hmm. And he said that, Republicans are watching, this was a direct quote, watching in irritation to see. I think that my candidacy is giving some people some form of irritable bowel syndrome as they watch and break fundraising records. But no, really, that's what's happening is I'm starting to get support from a lot of their donors, okay, and people who traditionally support them. And they want nothing more, a lot of these people, because, there's people on the left and the right who want nothing more than to silence me and to see me fail. It's put them in an uncomfortable situation. And then this last week, you had former Congressman Bob Barr, who wrote an op-ed in Town Hall. And he just said, okay, when are you going to address the elephant in the room? Why isn't Laura Loomer on the NRCC list? She's raising more money than a lot, if not majority of the candidates who are on the NRCC list for young guns. And the mainstream media, of course, has just had a total blackout. And they've done the same thing to you. So I know you can relate. And this is very valid and this is true because you used to go on Fox News all the time. And this whole idea of a blacklist is real. This is not a conspiracy theory. So when people ask me, oh, well, why isn't anybody in the media talking about your campaign? It just seems natural. Why haven't you been on to talk about your lawsuits and, this egregious censorship? Well, it's because even Fox News has a blacklist, right? Along with CNN and MSNBC and all of these mainstream media sites. So we don't really have, as conservatives, any media outlets who are going to cover this because even Fox News is bought and paid for and allowing themselves to be censored by what's her face, Suzanne Scott.
Yeah, and Paul Ryan. I mean, you mentioned young guns, right? And this is the formation of the elitist GOP establishment boys club. It is a boys club largely, but then they get to decide, they're the gatekeepers. They get to decide who's in or out. And then it's the same thing with Twitter changing its rules, right? For whether you get to play on the playing field. I mean,
obvious about it. They did it the day after I filed to run. So, just the absurdity of this for people, I don't understand what people in Congress are really waiting for. I mean, Republicans are just sitting back right now. I don't know what they're waiting for exactly. What more evidence do you need? We have the Project Veritas tapes where these executives are caught on camera. You have the reporting from Alan Bakari over at Breitbart with all these memos and documents exposing how they have a clear agenda. And this is their own phrase, right? This to prevent another Trump situation. And then the day after, literally one day after I filed to run for Congress, Twitter changes their rules and says, well, you have to win your primary first to get a verified check mark. But then all these Justice Democrats who are trying to primary Democrats, right? They said, well, that's not fair. We need verified accounts too. So then Twitter said, all right, well, every single person running for Congress in the country can have a verified account except Laura Loomer.
That's right. That's right. There's the Loomer loophole.
They literally said that. And Gateway Pundit reached out and they said, well, what about Laura Loomer? They said everybody but Laura Loomer.
Yeah.
Then my campaign tried to create a Facebook page for my campaign. And less than 24 hours after we created a Laura Loomer for Congress campaign page, it was deleted and banned off Facebook. And then Breitbart contacted Facebook, and Facebook said, well, we're creating a new rule today. And the new rule is that if you've been previously banned, it doesn't matter if you're running for office or even if you become an elected official, you are not allowed to have an account. So when I win my race, because I'm going to win, I guess I'll be the only member of Congress that doesn't have social media.
That's right.
I'm on Parler and I'm on Gab, but in terms of mainstream social media, so I don't know how President Trump is going to communicate with his future Congresswoman, because he's always on Twitter and I won't be.
I know. Well, you're going to have to lure him to, he's not on Gab or Parler yet, right?
No, but he should be. All Republicans should. And think about it. President Trump arguably is the most popular Twitter user. He could kill Twitter overnight if he wanted to.
I say it all the time. Yeah.
All he would have to do is say, I don't like the way Twitter is tweeting my supporters. And he could just get on Parler and get on Gab, and Twitter stock would drop so much. I mean, just to put this into perspective, I'm obviously not the president of the United States, okay? They talk about his Twitter account every single day. When I handcuffed myself to Twitter for 4 hours in New York City, my protest alone caused their stock to drop 8%. That's me, one person who, according to the left, nobody cares about me and I'm irrelevant and I have no, notoriety or anything. Imagine how much Donald Trump could make their stock crash if he said, enough of the censorship, I'm going over to Parler and Gab.
Yeah, right. And by the way, of course, you're totally pushed off these platforms. You chain yourself to Twitter, and you're immediately the number one trending topic on the site all day. So.
Right. And then they hit it, of course. And then that's what happened too when I decided to run for Congress. I hadn't even made an announcement that I was running. I simply filed with the FEC. And within 1 hour, my decision to run was the number one trend on Twitter. But then, of course, Twitter had to remove that. So you can't silence the truth, and you can't silence what the American people want. And that's why cancel culture isn't going to work. And it's what you said the other day when you said America first can't be contained. Twitter tried to delete the video that President Trump retweeted of you. Okay. And it was an America First clip. And that's what they want. They want to contain so badly these messages of nationalism, the messages of, being promoted by constitutionalists and free speech advocates and just basically conservative political talking points, anything conservative on the political spectrum, but it can't be contained. And they're starting to realize that, but they're now starting to become more aggressive in their tactics of how they contain this information. And now they're just out in the open. And you see that with the advisory board. They literally put an Islamic terrorist on their advisory board. And I remember when I was banned from Twitter and I said that it was because Islamic terrorists privately lobbied Twitter to ban me, people said I was crazy. They said I was a conspiracy theorist. And then it came out in the Wall Street Journal. So I sued. Then they said that I sued because of some type of joke, but now it's being confirmed.
Right.
Being confirmed that these social media sites, which have control over the flow of information and how information is dispersed around the world, they have decided to choose Chinese communists who are putting Muslims in concentration camps over Americans. They have decided to choose Islamic terrorist organizations over Americans. And this has a lot to do with what you have been reporting on. I would say that you're probably one of the most important immigration experts in our nation, and people who are interested in learning about immigration policy should be reading your work and speaking with you, because the reason why we're having all of these problems with our speech is because Silicon Valley, about 78% or so of their employees are on visas. They're foreigners. They're not even from this country. So you have the Democrats saying that they're against election interference, foreign election interference, but all you have at Twitter and Facebook are foreigners from countries like China and countries like Saudi Arabia deciding which Americans are allowed to have speech and which aren't in an election year. Yeah. It's foreigners who are deciding the rules about what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate speech in an election year.
No question about it. It is globalist election interference. And it's the only kind of election meddling that the Democrats look the other way at. So let's talk a little bit about Facebook more. And we've talked about this board. I think we had talked about this offline, about this new shadow group, American Edge, that was just incorporated a couple of months ago. And the people that are populating the board of this new nonprofit, which is going to lobby for exempting Facebook from all sorts of regulations, are establishment Republicans.
I know, it's awful. It's awful. It's not just Democrats too. And you have these establishment Republicans who are, I guess, getting paid now to advise this group, which is, they're calling themselves, I can't believe they're even calling themselves a nonprofit. I don't understand how you can be considered a nonprofit organization, and how this is really what it is it's a form of lobbying. And what they're doing, it couldn't be more obvious. They're trying to buy off and pay off American lawmakers in Congress so that they don't support antitrust legislation against big tech, which has recently been proposed by the Trump administration and the DOJ. And, one of my lawsuits that I filed about a year and a half ago was an antitrust lawsuit against Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Apple. Something that you probably haven't heard about because the media doesn't talk about it, but it was actually allowed to go through the DC Circuit
Court. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So it's shameful. And I personally think that it should be illegal. I know this probably would never happen just given Citizens United, but I think that it should be illegal for lawmakers to accept campaign contributions from big tech. Because the First Amendment is not for sale to the highest bidder. The First Amendment is not something that can be auctioned off, despite what Billy Long may think. The First Amendment is not something that is available to the highest bidder in Congress, or for, whichever lobbyist walks in and can be the most convincing in his efforts to get these establishment lawmakers to turn a blind eye to the silencing of their constituents.
For sure. And just for people who might not have caught the Billy Long allusion, describe what that was like, because you were in the hearing room. You were the only one who had the guts to call out Jack Dorsey and this Republican from, I think he's from Louisiana, House Republican.
Yeah, Missouri.
Right.
So this was in 2018, I believe, September 5th, and it was in the House Energy Commerce hearing on big tech censorship of conservatives. And Congressman Billy Long was in this hearing, and Jack Dorsey had just finished answering one of Steve Scalise's questions about political bias, and he lied. He committed perjury. And mind you, these hearings are paid for by taxpayer dollars, and I am a taxpayer, so I felt compelled to stand up as a taxpayer who was witnessing, a billionaire tech executive get away with perjury in Congress under oath. And I stood up and I called him a liar, and I said, "You are a liar, Jack Dorsey. You censored me." And I listed off all the names of people who he censored. I said, one of your employees even deleted President Trump's Twitter account, and you are trying to influence the election and sway the election so that the Democrats can steal the election. And Billy Long, this congressman from Missouri, he decided to auction me off. This is a Republican. This wasn't even a Democrat.
Yeah.
He decided to auction me off and shout down over me. And call on the police to have me escorted out of the hearing. But meanwhile, none of these members of Congress even understood what they were doing when they were questioning these tech executives. You could tell that they had such a lack of understanding about how big tech works. They probably don't even use social media. They have aides in their congressional offices who do it for them. And, it's just a shame that that's the kind of representation that we have. It's on both sides of the aisle. And then meanwhile, the same day you had the Kavanaugh hearings, and Chuck Grassley was allowing for these radical leftist women coming in with period blood and crazy signs to disrupt. And what did Chuck Grassley say? He said, well, this is America and they have a First Amendment right to protest. So the Democrats have a First Amendment right to falsely accuse Brett Kavanaugh of rape, but I don't have a First Amendment right to call out Jack Dorsey for committing perjury?
Yeah. Oh, it was so pathetic. I'll never forget it. It's one of those things that just burned into my mind.
And people laughed. And that was the worst part about it, is people laughed and they thought it was so funny. And it's not funny, because we're watching our lawmakers on both sides of the aisle literally auction off our First Amendment right. And every single day we're seeing a total erosion of our constitutional rights. And really, it's the First Amendment that makes this country great. So I'll just never forget that day, and how Fox News and CNN and all these so-called free speech warriors online who grift for donations, they laughed at it. They thought it was something.
Oh yeah, it was so rude, and I think that there was a component of sexism and misogyny there as well. And I mean, and neither of us are the type to go, invoking that card, frivolously.
Imagine if I was black. Imagine if I was black. Do you think that a white Republican congressman would get away with auctioning off a black woman on the whole in Congress?
Oh yeah, great optics that would have been, right? But no, yeah. Yeah. But no, I mean,
I like to say, first of all, Billy Long, the only reason why people know him and the only reason why he became famous is because of me. And secondly, I don't think the American people have ever seen him move his mouth that fast since the last, I mean,
yeah.
it's so disgusting and slovenly on so many levels.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you get to Congress, what's the first thing that you're going to do?
Well, I hope that I am appointed to, the committees, which would allow me to do what I would like to do. But I would really like to address what I believe is the most pressing issue in our nation right now, and a serious civil rights violation, and that is the big tech censorship and the silencing of conservatives. I would really like to see our Civil Rights Act updated to include political affiliation as a protected class, because this cannot stand any longer. I'm sure that there are already going to be elections that suffer, and there are going to be seats that are lost as a result of tech interference this election cycle. And if we continue to allow Silicon Valley to determine what truth is and what is and isn't allowed online, I mean, we are going to have some serious problems. We already have serious problems in this nation. There's a lot of things I want to do, but I would make the argument that censorship is the most pressing issue in the world right now. And it's also the reason why we're in the coronavirus pandemic, because, we're witnessing something that we've never seen in our society before. Over 3 billion people in the world that's almost half of the world's population, are on some form of quarantine or lockdown because of this Chinese virus. And what no one wants to talk about is how we got to this position. And it's censorship. Censorship is the reason why millions of Americans have lost their jobs, because when whistleblower doctors were trying to get on Twitter and they were trying to inform the world about the coronavirus back in January, back in December, and how lethal it was, China was censoring these doctors. China was jailing these doctors, and China probably even killed some of these doctors, because some of them have actually died since trying to warn the world. And who knows if they died from coronavirus or whether they were murdered by the Chinese Communist Party. But when you really examine why we're in this pandemic and why so many people are suffering, it's because of censorship. And I haven't heard anybody talk about it.
I think that's a really brilliant angle. And even as we're speaking, you've got people all over the world. It's not just in the United States. Early this morning, I heard from an Irish journalist, Gemma O'Doherty, who had her Twitter account throttled because she had a video that she had posted of her advertising a lockdown protest in Ireland. The InfoWars guys just a couple of weeks ago, who organized the lockdown protests in Texas, are no longer on Twitter because of that. And all of these independent thinking doctors and dissidents in the medical community who know all about Anthony Fauci. So, I mean, and this goes to exactly the kinds of things that you have been blowing the whistle about for years. It's the broadening of their violation terms of service policies from things that are actually incitements of violence to opinions that are just differing from the establishment or that threaten them. That's why you threaten them so much, because you've illuminated it for people.
Right.
And so when everything becomes an incitement to violence that is merely or harassment or bullying, and yet at the same time, and I wanted to remember to bring this up, Facebook is essentially telling people it's okay for you to level death threats against Laura Loomer.
Right. So that's the thing, too, is everything that they're accusing people of doing, that they're guilty of themselves. And so let's just take the example of me and why people think I'm banned. There's a lot of people out there who have very strong opinions about me. They have no idea why I was banned. They just look it up online and they say, oh, well, oh, she's an Islamophobe or she's anti-Muslim. If you look at the tweet for, which I was banned for, all I was saying was Ilhan Omar's anti-Jewish. Surely this is something that even the Democrats agree with, because it was the Democrat Party that had to propose an anti-Semitism resolution when they decided to, embrace their new hijabi friends on the floor of Congress. who were going around destroying our relationships with foreign leaders, making comments like it's all about the Benjamins, and saying things like I don't know, you could just, there's so many nasty comments that they've made. And to be totally honest, I'm not even concerned about their comments. I'm more concerned about their actions. The fact that these women are advocating for members of ISIS. They refuse to condemn Hamas. That's what I think the focus should really be on. But they say that I'm anti-Muslim for highlighting these facts. But you want to know who actually is anti-Muslim and actually is hateful? Big tech. Because big tech has decided to have this, extensive relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, they have decided to do all of their manufacturing, or majority of their manufacturing, in China. And you know what China is doing under the Communist Party? They are putting innocent Muslim Uyghurs in concentration camps. They are sterilizing Muslim women in concentration camps in China. And big tech is well aware of this. And during the coronavirus, something that went entirely unreported, when China had to shut down some of their factories, they were like, well, we still have to produce and get a lot of these electronic devices out for big tech. So they actually put Muslim Uyghur slave laborers into the factories during this pandemic to produce these devices and do the manufacturing for big tech. And no one wants to talk about it. That's anti-Muslim. That is hateful. That is what you call bigotry.
Well, consistency is really not one of the fortes of Silicon Valley, is it? I mean,
you saw what was his face, that Ricky Gervais during the Golden Globes. He even called Apple out for using slave laborers. He didn't mention that it's Muslim slave labor, but how do these people justify calling me anti-Muslim and then saying it's okay for people to post death threats against me because they've labeled me a dangerous individual, when they are carrying out very dangerous activities by partnering with communist and totalitarian regimes around the world, and turning a blind eye to genocide? How many Muslims have died as a result of being placed in these concentration camps?
Well, we definitely need you in Congress. We definitely need you to be the thorn in the side of the establishment in both parties. And one of my concerns is, and I know you must have been following this, is that you've got a lot of these Silicon Valley operatives and tools, people who want jobs in Silicon Valley after they finish serving in the Trump administration, that are at the highest levels of power in the West Wing. And over the weekend, there was a piece in Politico that talked about the jockeying among some of these people. A couple of weeks ago, when the immigration ban had been unveiled, there were reports that there was somebody in the room who objected to the ban, such as it is. It really doesn't cover all that much. And the actual question that was asked was, well, what is Tim Cook going to think?
Who cares what Tim Cook thinks? But unfortunately, there's been this perceived notion that big tech is MAGA, and we've seen this. Microsoft, Apple, Google, Alphabet. There is nothing MAGA about big tech. There's nothing America first about big tech. All right. And this just goes to show you how dangerous these companies have become, and how big of a threat they are to our democracy. They now constitute over 1/5 of our economy. They're together over $2.2 trillion. Okay. And so when you look at the coronavirus and you look at all of the small businesses that suffered and all of the stocks that were going down, the only stocks that were actually increasing throughout the entire pandemic were big tech.
Yeah.
Because, well, of course they're going to increase, because what happens when you tell people that they're going to go to jail and they're going to be arrested if they leave their homes, and if they leave, okay? You're forcing people to social distance. You're telling them to consume their information online via social media. So of course all the stock's going to increase. Jeff Bezos made $23 billion in the 2 months of this lockdown that's occurred. Okay, he's made $23 billion. The richest man in the world just became $23 billion wealthier because, small businesses can't operate. We're going to shut down all the stores. We're going to shut down the country. But let all these hateful big tech executives who openly campaigned against President Trump. It's like welcoming the Trojan horse into the camp.
No question about it. And that Trojan horse is everywhere. I know I've talked to you about my huge concern with the data mining that all of these companies are doing in the schools. You know,
Right.
you lock away all of the kids, they're held hostage to all of that tech. And, you know, Google has, you know, they've got the white hat on, right? Oh, we're going to give away thousands of Chromebooks for free. It's not free. There is a huge price they're paying.
Yeah, they're data mining children too, and there was a lawsuit filed over this. And
Yes.
you know, look, I love President Trump. I'm a supporter of President Trump. I always have been. But I think it's really fair to say that he does not have, you know, people who are giving him proper advice, or his advisors, whoever is advising him on the issue of big tech is clearly not doing a good job, because it's seriously lacking. And the discussion that is taking place about social media is so surface level. It's not just Facebook and Twitter that is banning people. Okay, we're talking about banks that are banning Trump supporters. I had my Chase bank account shut down along with several other high-profile conservative activists because we support President Trump. And then when Dinesh D'Souza opened his mouth about this on Fox News, you know, thank God he did. You know, coincidentally, me and all those people who were shut down by Chase, we got a phone call the next day from the same woman in the executive branch of Chase who was very scripted in the way that she was speaking to us. And she wouldn't tell us why our accounts were shut down, but she said, oh, well, you know, she tried to say that we could resume service with Chase. But this is what they're getting away with. And no one's talking about it. It is not just about Facebook and Twitter. We're talking about payment processors, PayPal, okay? All types of payment processors which people can use for their campaign. I can't even raise money on PayPal on my campaign because I'm banned. And why did PayPal ban me? Well, they said that my values weren't their values after I put illegal aliens on Nancy Pelosi's lawn.
That's right.
So I was basically banned for being a Trump supporter because, you know, even after I was banned, the KKK still had access to PayPal. CARE is collecting zakat on PayPal, even though 1/8 of all zakat goes towards funding global jihad, right? So apparently funding global terrorism or supporting the KKK, that's totally okay with PayPal. But being a, you know, female Jewish Trump supporter is totally unacceptable to these tech companies. But yeah. I would love to sit down and provide the president's administration or the president himself with a proper briefing regarding tech censorship and you know, how serious it is. Because
yeah, I think they need to do over that White House social media summit. And there were some good people there, but you weren't there. Right.
Nobody who was actually banned was there. And so that's what the controversy was surrounding the social media summit, is that they had a social media summit to address tech censorship, and none of the people who were deplatformed were invited.
Yeah. And in fact, yes. And in fact, some of the people who were there are people who have advocated banning other people.
Right.
So.
Or people who were there have never even been banned themselves. Which is interesting. But yeah, none of the key people were ever invited. And it's because, you know, I don't know. I don't know who is advising him on these issues. And that's why I don't blame President Trump. Like, some people are very, you know, angry with the president right now regarding this matter of tech censorship. And while I do believe his administration could definitely do a better job addressing it, you know, I know that President Trump is the busiest man in the world, and he has so many things on his plate. And so he relies on his advisors to give him proper information. And that's why I like to think that it's his advisors who are not really giving him, you know, proper briefings on tech censorship.
Well, there's definitely a wall that's been constructed, right?
Definitely.
I mean,
yeah.
the wall on our southern border isn't finished, but they've got like a 50-foot wall that blocks off access between the president and, you know, people like you and me. And so, you know, when he tweeted that thing over the weekend, I'm thinking, well, that's like the authentic Trump himself speaking, right? He really does seem to care about this. But then when it comes to implementation and getting something done. He has repeated what he said a year ago, which is in the tweet that he sent over the weekend. It said, "Send me names and cases so we can do something." Well, you've been gathering names for a year. How much more time do you need?
What happened to that White House database? What happened to that White House database? And I was probably the first person to submit it, because I'll tell you this much: as soon as I found out, I filled it out immediately, thinking somebody was going to do something. What happened to the database, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, look, it's enough talk. Like, action needs to be taken, and I'm happy to see that Attorney General Barr is now looking into antitrust investigations into big tech. But even then, we've already had antitrust investigations into big tech over the last 2 years. Okay, last year, all 50 states attorneys generals filed antitrust into Google, and I want to know what the hell's going on with that investigation.
Yeah.
So it seems like nothing is going to be done prior to the election. And I hate to say it, but, I wouldn't even be surprised if Twitter bans the president right before the election. They've already deleted his account once before. And then they tried to say that it was a disgruntled employee to hide the fact that it was a Turkish national who deleted the president's account, a foreigner. Okay. So I just want to know, I'm sure, who knows if the president uses direct message on his Twitter account. I know that other elected officials do, because I had access to my Twitter account. Several members of Congress would message me on my Twitter account. But, just think about what that means when you have all these foreigners working in big tech. It's all foreign labor. And then it's foreigners who press the button to deactivate or delete the president's account. Are they spying on elected officials through the DMs? Well, yes, they are. And we know, because the Project Veritas tapes already confirmed this, where you have these employees and executives from Twitter saying, yes, we definitely would. We definitely would turn over private DMs and spy on people if it meant taking down President Trump and his administration. So what are they waiting for? What are we going to do with all this evidence and all these undercover tapes? Okay, what are we going to do? Just let them come out so we can have faux outrage for about a week or two and then go back to normal? I mean, it's having a serious, it's not just a free speech issue and a civil rights issue. Big tech is now a national security threat. And I don't know if you watched Attorney General Barr's press conference yesterday that he had.
Yes.
Let me just plug this in my laptop where it dies. I don't know if you were watching his press conference, but the Attorney General gave a press conference yesterday about the investigation into the Saudi Arabian terrorist who we now know was a supporter and an agent operative for Al-Qaeda at the Pensacola, Florida naval base, which left 3 people dead. In the very beginning of his press conference, the first thing that the Attorney General said was, well, the Department of Justice had requested that Apple unlock the iPhone or the iPhones of this Islamic terrorist who carried out this attack at a naval base, and Apple refused. Okay, Apple refused to comply with the American Justice Department in gathering information on an Islamic terrorist who murdered 3 people. Okay, they did the same thing in the San Bernardino case, if you recall.
That's right.
And then didn't unlock the cell phones of the ISIS terrorists in San Bernardino who killed several people. But you want to know what Apple did do is Apple gladly handed over all of Roger Stone's iCloud data to the Mueller investigation. So there is a war on conservatives, and this is a national security threat. I don't know who this White House official is that you're talking about when you said somebody supposedly said, what would Tim Cook think? But who the hell cares about what Tim Cook thinks if he's siding with Islamic terrorists who are coming into our country to murder Americans, and he's trying to, illegally give over information regarding Roger Stone to investigators? Who cares what Tim Cook thinks?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, Tim Cook is an enemy combatant.
Yes, he is. And he's got spies and operatives working for him inside the swamp, inside the Oval Office. And that is the huge problem. And, I've named names. I think that Jared Kushner and Ivanka, to a lesser extent, but to a significant extent, are a huge part of the problem. I mean, they showed up at Jeff Bezos's party when he opened up his new mansion in the Beltway. Ivanka flies around the world with the CEOs of all of these major Silicon Valley companies, including the ones that, I mean, they're all dependent on H-1B. They're all pressing to import millions of foreign workers here. A significant number of them who are national security threats, whether they're from Muslim countries, whether they're from China, or anywhere else. There was an H-1B Pakistani doctor who was just charged with jihad, who worked at the Mayo Clinic, one of the most prestigious medical institutions in America. It seems to me that the most immediate and effective step that we could have taken in the wake of the pandemic was to freeze all of those programs.
Well, that doesn't really surprise me, given that the Mayo Clinic is, isn't it in Minnesota, which has turned into like.
Have you ever been,
turned into an Islamic nation, let's be honest. I did extensive reporting in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I have friends of mine who are activists who feel so strongly that their life is in danger, that they are putting their homes on the market and leaving. Because it's been totally taken over. You have, a Muslim Brotherhood Attorney General, Keith Ellison, in Minnesota, who is threatening to arrest American citizens for protesting the lockdown. But you know what he just allowed in Minnesota to take place a few days ago on Nakba Day? The Nakba Day protest. You have jihadists taking to the streets, burning American flags, burning Israeli flags, chanting death to America, death to Israel. Okay? And he allowed that. Jihadists are allowed to openly protest during lockdown. Okay? But Americans who want to go to work to feed their kids are going to be arrested. So I'm not surprised about the Mayo Clinic at all. Just Minnesota is just so awful.
I had to be at the Mayo Clinic for a long period of time when my daughter was sick a couple of years ago, and I was shocked. Laura. It was like when I went to London about 6 years ago, Londonistan. I mean, you go in the elevator and everyone is in full kneecaps, right? And the sheikhs have their 7 wives all crammed into the elevator. It's like, what country is this? Not mine.
Well, and if you recall too, you along with myself and Pamela Geller and several others, you received a notification from Twitter, what we call Silicon Valley Sharia. Right. So not only are these American companies that are siding with foreign enemy combatants over American citizens, but they're also telling Americans to lawyer up if they're in violation of Sharia law. And I know I wrote about this extensively, and you did too. We call it Silicon Valley Sharia. But why isn't this being talked about by the DOJ? I mean, does the DOJ not have a problem with the fact that big tech is trying to impose Sharia law on American citizens?
Yeah. I think we've got a good lineup of all the hearings that you'll be chairing. One on debanking, one on student data mining, one on Silicon Valley Sharia. Yeah.
We don't even need to necessarily have new laws to address this. It's a crime to lie to Congress. It's a crime to lie to Congress. And Jack Dorsey, Sundar Pichai, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sheryl Sandberg all lied to Congress. And so if General Flynn and Roger Stone can have their lives destroyed, and the mainstream media and the political elite of our nation can advocate for them to be sent to prison for the rest of their lives, there's no reason why, and those are innocent men, by the way, there's no reason why that we can't actually follow through on sending Silicon Valley tech executives to prison for committing perjury. I'm sorry, but being a billionaire doesn't mean that you're above the law. And if Nancy Pelosi really means what she says when she says nobody's above the law, then I say it's time for these tech executives to get locked up.
Amen. Lock them up for sure. Laura, it's been so fantastic having you. And I want to encourage everybody to go to lauraloomerforcongress.com. There's a donate button there. You have been phenomenal in your fundraising abilities, and it really should be at the top of every GOP establishment story. Right. You're your own young gumbo, right? I mean, you don't need them.
It's interesting because I know we sometimes text back and forth privately, and I think it's funny because some of the people who were put on the young gun list have already lost their primaries. These are the so-called winning candidates, and they've already, they already lost. They put them in a short dress and they put them on Fox News and they told them to donate tons of money to them, and they already lost. Meanwhile, I'm actually going to win, and I'm not on the list, but who knows? I don't know why I'm not on the list, but either way, I'm not just going to sit around and wait to be put on a list to be, told I have a right to run. I'm going to win my primary on August 18th, and then I'm going to go on to to win my race. And this is the same way that President Trump was treated. This was the same way that Ronald Reagan was treated. They were kind of brushed aside by the establishment and given a hard time. But regardless, we're going to work hard because this is a movement that can't be stopped. And hopefully when coronavirus is over, we can get you back into Palm Beach for the fundraiser that was
planning that. Yes.
And it's going to be great. It's something that they can't contain. And I want to help the Republican Party. I am an asset to the Republican Party. Okay. I have a massive national following. I'm, raising a lot of money. I'm polling ahead of the Democrat incumbent, and I can help Republicans flip a House seat, and I can be a strong voice for Republican leadership when I win. So there's no reason why people should keep sidelining me and giving me a hard time. But if they do, just roll with the punches and you keep on moving.
Well, that's what I admire about you. And there's a lot of other of these people who have run these vanity campaigns and not put in the hard work and the shoe leather and the on the ground work that you're doing. I mean, it's so valuable. It's a valuable lesson, and everybody should be watching who's considering running for office. This is how you do it. So I know I'm not talking out of school here. Your birthday's in a couple of days.
Yes, my birthday is on May 21st. So 27, which means that when I win my race, I'll also be the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. So
that's amazing. And so what I want everyone to do is to go to lauraloomerforcongress.com and give an early birthday present. Make sure you donate. This is one of the most exciting and consequential races in the country. And I'm glad to call you friend and warrior for the things that we believe in.
Well, thank you. And also too, just something about you that I'll say is, you really are a hero. You're somebody who I admire. You are, the embodiment of a strong woman. And it, will make me cry because I just hate seeing you. I just hate seeing the way that Republicans treat you and the way that people have tried to ruin your life and ruin your career over the last few months, simply because you've actually had the balls to stand up for free speech and to defend people who have been, wrongfully deplatformed and wrongfully silenced simply for speaking truth. And so, more so than anybody else, I'd say you have more integrity than anybody I know in conservative media. And I just want to thank you for always just thinking about the truth and thinking about integrity before, being a Fox News commentator or making money or being accepted by the establishment and getting invited to their swanky little parties, because it really helps a lot of people. And you've done so much for me, helping me get my message out and my voice out while others have tried to, erase me.
Well, I am rooting for you. I can't wait till you storm the swamp. And I hope you have a great birthday. Wish I could be there. I'm going to have to light a candle and put it on Instagram for you.
Beach when this ends, if this ever ends.
I know. I need to get out there. All right. Take care, Laura.
Yeah.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
America is good and America is great. Of these basic truths, there is or should be little dispute among us here. But two questions loom large. Number one, for how long will America, the America that we grew up in, remain good and great? And number two, to whom shall we entrust the existential responsibility of securing the goodness and greatness passed down peacefully for generations? I wish I could stand here and chirp happily about positive news. Yes, unemployment rates are at historic lows. Yes, regulations and taxes are being cut. Yes, we've got some stellar judges who've been confirmed. And yes, the reckless, feckless liberal media has finally self-immolated like a slow motion downing of the Hindenburg, and it's okay to gloat about it. Yes, we have much to thank President Trump for as he battles the Beltway swamp, the deep state, the administrative state, and the fake news fourth estate. And that's okay to applaud as well. But there is no sugarcoating America's long-term forecast. We face fearful odds. The game is rigged. The playing field is manifestly unlevel, And I will warn you that I am going to go over time because the most important issue that we face is immigration, and we need to be talking about it more than one panel in 20 minutes. Some of you old-timers may remember that when I was once young, my first CPAC in 2002 was to talk about my very first book, Invasion, which exposed how border failures and systemic non-enforcement of our visa program rules created the national security crisis that led to 9/11. Does anyone remember that? My last book, Sold Out, which I co-authored in 2015 with former American computer programmer turned labor lawyer John Miano, documented how big business and big government created an economic crisis by exploiting the H-1B tech worker visa program and other foreign employment visas for cheap labor. I have been accused of being a quote-unquote grifter for wanting to inform and educate citizens about these destructive rackets. But it's the GOP sellouts, not just the radical open borders left, that is in bed with immigration saboteurs. Like the ones who hijacked the Tea Party movement to shill for amnesty. Those are the real grifters, cashing in and practicing deceit at the expense of their base and at the expense of our country. Our shining city on the hill, and that is a phrase that has been repeated over and over and over again at every CPAC since Reagan spoke here, has become a much abused doormat to the world. Building the border wall is only half the battle. The numbers tell all. Our future is dimmed. The odds are fearful. We currently grant 1 million legal permanent residencies to people from around the world every year. The number of green card holders is expected to increase by 10 million by 2025. That's more than the current combined population of Dallas, St. Louis, Denver, Boston, Chicago, LA, and Atlanta. Now multiply that number by at least 3.5. Thanks to chain migration created in 1952 and expanded exponentially by Congress in 65 and 90, these new immigrants can sponsor their entire extended families, parents, spouses, adult children and their children, and siblings and their children. Princeton University found that recently admitted immigrants sponsored an average of 3.45 additional relatives each. An estimated 85,000 refugees and 20,000 plus asylees enter the country annually through an overwhelmed system so rife with fraud and abuse that the process is jokingly dubbed, quote, refugee roulette by immigration lawyers. How's that for a way to run your country? In total, from fiscal year 2008 to 2017, the U.S. gave green cards to more than 2 million migrants for various humanitarian claims, a population larger than the city of Philadelphia. Nearly 500,000 more immigrants in that time frame got in through the diversity visa lottery. I've been talking about this damn thing since 2002, and it's still around. All the promises from the Republicans that we elect to office who promise that they're going to secure our borders and get our immigration system in order. And we still have this program that hands out visas like Pez candy and Lotto. Illegal aliens are eligible if a legal family member wins the jackpot. Tens of thousands of people are pouring in from terrorism breeding grounds through the lottery, unvetted, unmonitored, and unassimilated. Thanks again to chain migration, immigration, lotto winners, spouses, and unmarried children under 21 all get passes into the country too. Nearly half of all illegal aliens in the country have violated the terms of short-term visitor or work visas. More than 10.8 million people received such visas alone in fiscal year 2015, including 500,000 foreign university and graduate students on academic visas and nearly 700,000 total foreign guest workers, both skilled and unskilled. Not to mention their spouses, many of whom are allowed to work here as well. Hey, remember when Congress promised that they were going to enact a nationwide visa entry-exit system to track legal short-term visa holders. Remember that? Nobody in Congress does. One has yet to be built, even in the wake of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which were perpetrated in part by several illegal alien visa overstayers. E-Verify has been stalled. Sanctuary cities have metastasized, and both parties are to blame. And yes, I'm looking at you, retired Paul Ryan, and yes, I'm looking at you, Mitch McConnell. And yes, I'm looking at you, Bush family, and yes, I'm looking at you, the ghost of John McCain. I don't have much time. Let me get through this. This unrelenting inflow of new green card holders, short-term foreign visa holders, legal temporary workers, refugees and asylees is supplemented by, of course, the 13 to 30 million illegal aliens who expect amnesty and chain migration privileges from Washington, despite breaking immigration laws governing everything from border jumping to ID fraud, benefits fraud, tax fraud, and marriage fraud, to human and drug trafficking, to employment rules, deportation orders, and visa overstayers. By the way, I wrote that paragraph as a rejoinder to people who say, well, they're not breaking any other laws. The feds, under both Republican and Democrat administrations, have proved themselves serially unwilling and incapable of handling the lapses, the backlogs, the overload, and yes, invasion. The numbers tell all. Open borders anarchy multiplied by endless chain migration, amnesty, and cheap labor pipelines endangers our general welfare and the blessings of liberty to which we all pay lip service every time CPAC comes around. By every clear measure, the war is not on immigrants, but on American sovereignty. I have been called white for stating the facts. I'm not white, I'm just right. Both native-born and immigrant families like mine, which revere the rule of law, common traditions, constitutional principles, one identity, one tongue, are being replaced by militantly unassimilable and hostile generations of what? Future Democrat voters whose tribal allegiance to the left has only hardened over time. How is it that we have Republicans in Congress on Capitol Hill that are doing the bidding of the Dreamer movement? What about our dreams? Until and unless we reclaim the right of self-determination over the numbers, we are doomed. My fellow Americans, we stand at the bridge as Horatius stood at the narrow bridge over the Tiber River alone, facing fearful odds, as hordes of Etruscans marched towards him and cowards cut and ran behind him. Like his enemies, our enemies are both foreign and domestic. Inside our already flimsily defended borders, we are not at peace. Or rather, the radical left is not at peace with us. From the comfort of TV green rooms and Beltway back rooms and corporate boardrooms and conference ballrooms, it may not look like civil war is imminent, but threats and outright violence against you, ordinary law-abiding people, are now regularized features, not just random bugs of political life in these disunited states. You all know, who are plugged in and on the ground, that college students are being punched, elderly citizens are being harassed, MAGA hat wearers are being kicked off planes and assaulted in school hallways and restaurants, conservative speakers are being mobbed and Molotov cocktails, ICE agents and their families are being targeted, pro-lifers are being kicked and menaced, Pro-Trump, anti-jihad moms on social media are being monitored and doxxed. The madness is beyond parody. Last week, you all saw this. Social justice media warriors whipped up hysteria over a Mar-a-Lago pastry chef over her Instagram posts. Where are the sanctuary spaces for law-abiding conservatives who simply want to exercise their rights to free speech and peaceable assembly? The divide in this country is between decent people who stand up for America and dastardly people who want to bring America to its knees. We certainly should make common cause with others across the aisle who share our values, but we should never rush to embrace those whose fundamental aim is to smear and destroy us all. That is suicidal. Which is why I cannot stand here and stay silent about the role that Van Jones has played in attempting to silence the right. My objection is not to his support for criminal justice reform. I have dedicated much of my own time, energy, and money fighting wrongful convictions, false allegations, and prosecutorial and forensic misconduct. Newsflash, next time you need a conservative to talk about criminal justice reform, call me. You do not need someone who is going to spew fake news, pro-illegal alien propaganda to talk about criminal justice reform to conservatives. Newsflash and fact-checked. The most recent research by FAIR found that illegal aliens are up to 5.5 times more likely than Americans to be incarcerated in state prisons compared to Americans and legal residents. But my most vehement objection is to this stage being used to lend legitimacy to the George Soros-funded organization Color of Change, which dedicated itself to censoring and sabotaging right-leaning groups for championing the free market, opposing radical Islam, and exposing open borders. Have you forgotten? 7 years ago, Van Jones's group pressured Pepsi and McDonald's and Intuit and other companies to cut ties to the mainstream American Legislative Exchange Council. That's a half-century-old association of mainstream conservative state legislators who believe in, quote, the Jeffersonian principles of free markets, limited government, federalism, and individual liberty. What was ALEC's crime? Crafting model legislation on voter ID to protect election integrity, immigration enforcement measures, and self-defense legislation to strengthen Second Amendment rights. These lights are flashing red, and that's exactly right, because the lights are flashing red on America. Color of change. Thank you. Color of change. And the smear machine racket known as the Southern Poverty Law Center. Let Washington know how you feel about it. Let the conservative media know how you feel about it. They should be covering it. These people use the same playbook to marginalize and criminalize mainstream conservatives, anti-jihad groups, and immigration hawks as quote-unquote hate groups. They want to push us out of the public square. We shouldn't be holding hands with them. They conspire with payment processors in Silicon Valley to deprive the right of our voices and our ability to make a living. There are so many speaking up and fighting on the front lines for liberty and security. They're being de-Twittered. They're being de-PayPal'd. They're being de-Facebooked. They're being de-platformed. Many of you are in this room. If you are one of them, please stand up and let us know who you are. And thank you, each and every one of you, for what you're doing. You may feel like you're alone. People like my friends Laura Loomer and Gavin McInnes, people like the Center for Immigration Studies, David Horowitz's Freedom Center. There's so many, and I don't want to start naming them because I know I'm going to forget, but go to michellemalkin.com because my latest column is about it. Many of you are in this room, and many have been forced to beg for money to help them fight in court to restore their reputations. Many have been barred from this room. And if you're out there, you should know that you are not alone. Nice is not enough. After 25 years of doing this in this business, as somebody in conservative media and activism, I have to tell you that the hardest lesson to learn is that logic and facts and appeals to decency and fairness are not enough. Bemoaning double standards is not enough. Ultimately, our future will not be secured in a Fox News anchor chair or a think tank office or at a cushy GOP retreat or on a cruise ship. The future is on the front lines, at the edge of the bridge. Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth, death cometh sooner or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temple of his gods? Instead of throwing allies under that bridge, movement conservatives who have preached so comfortably as I have, here in the Beltway or from our cubicles, about defending America, while so many establishment Republicans preserve the status quo, need to help provide financial and moral support to the disruptors willing to fight fire with fire. It may be a coincidence, or maybe it's providential, that I am privileged enough to speak here today on the 7-year anniversary of Andrew Breitbart's death. God bless him. He was a disruptor. He was a disruptor among defenders of the status quo. We need more like him. That is the future. We need legislative action at the local and state level. We need politicians who will do something to stop the sowers of hate and division and their handmaidens. Use the tools at your disposal. Don't just stand there. Diversity is not our strength. And I know those words are a trigger. Diversity is not our strength. Unity is. Our common purpose is the common defense of our nation. Good people make America great. Good people stand up and fight. Thank you.